Goes back to school days, primary school days. I was educated at Black Forest and was very fortunate in those days to have participated in the Mark Mitchell Shield, which was a competition amongst primary schools. And when I was there, of course, we won it. There was two other players, Doug Fitzgerald and a bloke called Hancock, that ended up by playing with Glenelg. And I should have gone to Glenelg from there. I was approached by Chuka May to go to Glenelg, but for some unknown reason they never followed it up. And I ended up with South Adelaide. And then footy, well, I'm jumping the gun a little bit there because I went to Prince Alfred College and under a very good coach called Chester Bennett. In the era that I was there was quite a few people, Peter Morton, Mark Skinner, quite a few players that went on to play league football. And it was just something that I enjoyed doing. I hated training. I wasn't, I was able to get away with it, I think, by not training. From Prince Alfred College, I ended up by going to South Adelaide. I don't know why. I never followed South. I never really followed league football. Didn't know too much about it. But I was very fortunate to have gone to South Adelaide because of the amenity that South Adelaide offered, being the Adelaide Oval. I mean, how lucky could you be going from a kid from college? I mean, I must admit we had good grounds at the college, but I still have fond memories of running out in the Adelaide Oval with the freshly mown grass and the smell and just the layer of the ground the way it was. You know, it was just a fantastic feeling, coupled with the fact that we had, in those days, a struggling club, and but there was a good group of people in the club that were playing football and the administrators. In those days, of course, they were all volunteers, and I don't think any of the players got paid. I know I didn't, and we never thought about it. It was just something we did on a Saturday. Keeping in mind we only trained Tuesdays and Thursdays, so that was, well, some of them did. I tried to avoid it as much as I could, but yeah. So that's basically my formula, and then it's all from there on. It's history, I suppose. It was something I did Saturday. It was an outlet. I mean, I could have done other things, I suppose, but I never thought about it. I played 2 games while I was still at school, at the end of the school curriculum, the season. I played two games. I played my first game at Norwood, understood Peter Aish, and the second game, it was Sturt on the Adelaide Oval, and that was the last 2 games of the 1962 season. So, no, to be quite honest with you, I never thought about it, but it's ironic because I said I never sort of realised that we got paid, but at the end of the season, I got £2 for a quid a game, and I thought, well, this is pretty good. But then we went on a footy trip to Port Pirie, and I lost the £2 on the train playing cards, so the £2 went out the train door pretty quick. Yeah, I learned from that, never gamble, so. Well, it was Tony Shaw and myself. We were the only really 2 college kids. But it was a very comfortable feeling. I mean, in those days we were languishing, South were languishing bottom. It was more of a country atmosphere. The players, Graham Christie, Dick Jackson, Graham Durbridge, Peter Judd, they were players that were just like me out there to play football. And we had a very strong off-field relationship. We, as a group, we'd always be doing things together, and particularly we go surfing a lot. So the Foster boys. So it was about camaraderie, but football was a part of it. It wasn't all of it. There was a nucleus of a group of blokes that got on pretty well together. And we had some wonderful times together because we were allowed to drink, we were allowed to go out at night times. We weren't restricted in our personal life. And it morely reflected on our performance on a Saturday. But we trained Tuesday, Thursday, and then played Saturday, and then on Sunday we'd go down to the Adelaide Oval, and we had a big bath down there, and we'd all get in there'd be a dozen of us to get into this huge big bath together and frolic around, and you know, it was a communal shower situation. It was a real character building club, which indeed all clubs were like that in those days. Pretty precious these days. I wouldn't want to be playing today. My coach when I started was Bill Sutherland. Bill was a lovely bloke. I don't know how to answer it. He was a good bloke that eventually got sacked. Keeping in mind in those days, I mean, we were just there to play footy. I suppose premierships and results were important, but we didn't think about that. It wasn't until a couple of years later when a bloke made us think about it that we started to realise that, hey, if we work together, we can do something. It was just what we did in '64. Well, he had the nucleus. He had the same team as '62, '63. '64, he brought in discipline. He brought in a training ethic, fitness. But he never lost that, took away from us that camaraderie that we shared for the last I shared for the last 1.5 years. So we were still able to have a drink. We used to go Friday nights to his pub. We'd have a drink, a team meeting. He brought in disciplines in terms of training. He brought in physical trainers, a bloke called Joe Deemel and Keith Haston, Mark Haston's dad, amongst others. He brought in a training regime that just didn't involve doing laps around the oval, and he brought in skills coaches, and fitness coaches, as I mentioned, and he had us had a few of them running upstairs and skipping on the oval and running through sandhills and what have you. But, you know, he was serious about it, and he made us perform. He had us running timed laps around the oval. I struggled to make the stopwatch used to run out when I started to run around the oval. But he didn't ask us to do anything that he couldn't do. And so we all respected him. He was tough. We still train 2 nights a week. Sundays we'd go from the bath to a run through the sandhills or around North Adelaide. We used to swim off the weir in the Torrens in those days when it was not the way it is today. He had us running up Montefiore Hill and things that we never really associated with playing footy. He also brought in a really good level of ethics from the trainers, and we had a good head trainer, we had good trainers, all volunteers, but he had people to show them how to treat injuries, not just the good old rub and the massage, but how to work muscles, how to do whatever. And my fondest moments were lying on the table having a massage. Anyway, he did completely different to Bill Sutherland, and results proved that what he did was correct. Yeah. I mean, none of us played for money. It wasn't an issue. I mean, we didn't even think about it. I think some of the country boys might have got travelling expenses. Alfie Skews was up at Gawler, and Dick Jackson was a fireman up at Port Pirie. There's a few other country boys. I think they may well have got a financial return for travelling expenses. But no, it's, we all played for the club and for the love of the game. You have your good days, your bad days. I wasn't going to beat myself up over whether I just wanted to play footy. I've never considered that I was good or bad. I considered I was lucky because I was able to do what I apparently have done. But I never talk footy, I never think footy, I never reflect on it until people like yourself ask me questions. And it's something I've tried to move on from. The flame's been reignited in the last 6 months. But, I live with it. That's what it is. And perhaps I was a little bit better than what I give myself credit for, or what I think I give myself credit for. Well, I won't say I like to party. I was just a kid out of school who liked to have a drink, and I was a college kid. I was brought up with manners and respect, and but I was also brought up to enjoy life. My mum and dad gave me a good life, and they enjoyed their life. Of course, when I left school, I found out about girls. Maybe I should have stayed at school, but and there was always the balls and the dances and the parties and through your schoolmates and what have you. And of course, as you get into football, the culture was in those days you could have a few beers, it wasn't a problem. I really went a bit further than a few beers because I used to enjoy a drink in the pubs with my mates and what have you. But there's one thing I will say about Neil Curley. Molly didn't appreciate my lifestyle, but he never tried to stop me from doing, because he knew if I did, I'd merely walk away from the game. And he said to me, "Don't leave your football in a bar if you don't produce on a Saturday for me, we'll look at things a bit in a different angle," which I appreciated. He never tried to take away from me because he knew that I could give him what he wanted on a Saturday with my lifestyle. I was no different to a lot of people, it's just I got a bit more exposure, I think. I had a beautiful mother who used to wash and iron my clothes, and so I present myself well. And I think my mum was no different to all the mothers of footballers in those days. I had a father that was always in the background. He never ever forced himself onto me with an opinion, with advice, particularly when it came to football. He gave me a bit of advice on drinking and my lifestyle, but he never missed a game, but I never knew he was there. So he had one thing that he wanted me to do, and that was to have clean football boots. And Dad, I think, for the first year cleaned my boots. But I never ever played football without clean footy boots. Mum used to wash the laces, so I'd always run onto in those days the grounds were just mud. Not like the prima donnas today that run around on billiard tables. I mean, it's pathetic. And they can't even do a drop kick these days. I can vividly remember Bob Shearman and Ian Day and coming out of the centre on various grounds and doing the drop kick, 60, 70 yards stab kick. But Saturday morning I'd wake up, normal thing, I guess, but I used to always go to the Goodger Fish Cafe for a feed of fish, as maybe to get the alcohol out of me from the night before. But And that was my routine. And then after the game, we'd generally go to a pub somewhere for a drink. And the good thing about it wasn't just the players from our side. It'd be 4 or 5 players, but it'd be Bob Philp from Port Adelaide. It'd be all players from all players from the other clubs. And you'd have 4 or 5 blokes that like a drink, and we'd all go somewhere. Wasn't in those days they didn't all have the clubs like they have today. When they brought the clubs in, that stopped all that camaraderie because we were all expected to go back to the clubs, which I resented. And I did like to mix, and to this day I still mix with players from all the other clubs. But so that was basically my daily Saturday routine. It was just pretty simple preparation. I think, as you know, the bloke that really put me on the map was Ernie Sigley. And I was always on his show, which gave me the exposure to the general public, which made me, people knew more about me because of Ernie and being on his show. I was doing the Wheel of Fortune, all that sort of stuff with him. And he was a really good mate of mine and a great fan. And so much so that I see he had one of my Nucky Cups. I tried to get it back from him, and I think he might have flogged it when he was going bad. I shouldn't say that. He's never gone bad, but I don't know where it is. I didn't know anything about playing in finals, even though we'd won a Mark Mitchell shoe. I mean, I can't remember anything about it. Next minute we're in the grand final. Some people sit down and talk kick for kick. The only thing I can remember when we run the grand final, I thought, oh yeah, another game of footy down the pub. I ran into the changing rooms and I'm sitting there waiting for everybody else to come in. And they're all out there waiting for the presentation of the cup. So I had to go back out on the oval and get in the melee and make out I knew what was happening. But no, it was just one of those things. It's I think the excitement now, 60 years later, is the fact that I'm more excited now than I was back in '64. I mean, they came and I accepted them, but I didn't think about it. I mean. I might be a bit flippant when I say this, but it's the truth. I won some pretty serious stuff when you reflect. In 1964, I won a Ford Fairlane. I won a Chrysler Valiant. I won every monetary, every trophy that was out there. And I thought, well, what in the hell do I do with 2 cars? I got a little Volkswagen. And anyway, the awards didn't mean anything to me, even to the point where that year I was red hot favourite to win the McGarry Medal. I didn't think about it. We were up at Ernie Sigley's place. And I don't even know whether it was broadcast or televised in '64, I don't know. Anyway, I missed out and Jeff Motley won it. I think I might have been runner-up. I don't even know where I came. But it didn't fuss me. I mean, it's an award and, I never live for awards or recognition. Unfortunately, I got a bit of recognition, a few awards, but I accept them and it's all part of what I've, I guess, achieved. After '64, I missed 2 seasons. I did a cartilage in '65 and I did another, and I went wool pressing. That was the end of my footy career. And I had 2 of the best years of my life out in the bush. And then the club rang me and said, oh, do you want to have another go? I said, yeah, well, I was lucky enough to be able to go on for another, from 67 to 74, playing X number of games, which gave me the total of 200 and whatever it was. Anyway, 68 I was a playing coach at South Adelaide. And I had a pretty good year. I didn't want to coach. I was pushed into it by the club. And I got 5,000 quid for coaching, which I didn't want, but they suggested that that's what I should have. I got that money for 3 years. But it was Freddie Bills on the Adelaide Oval. And Freddie was a sort of a distant relation of mine, and he was one of my drinking buddies when we played Torrens. And he kept on grabbing me in the ruck contest because it was all one-on-one in those days. And I kept on complaining to the umpire, who I would have complained to him. I said, look, properly and legally, that you're awarding him a free and I should be getting a free. Anyway, he gave one free against me to Fred in front of the members' stand, and I just exploded. It was so much a wrong call that I called him a cheat, which in my opinion he was. Otherwise I wouldn't have said it. Keeping in mind that in those days we said horrible things to each other on the footy field. Horrible things, swearing. We used to swear at umpires. That was part of the game. It was get it out on a Saturday. Anyway, he said, you're reported. And I said, I don't care, you're still a fucking cheat. Well, the report came up that I'd called him an effing cheat, which was an incorrect report, because I called him a cheat, and he should have reported me for calling him a cheat. Anyway, Alan Hickenbottom, who was the president of the club, insisted on representing me. Now, Alan Hickenbottom didn't like me, he didn't like Neil Curley, and he didn't like Jimmy Dean. And he dismissed the advocate that normally would have represented me. The advocate came to me later and he said, I would have got you off that with a technicality. But Hickenbottom went and said nothing. And as a result, I got pinged eventually, one match, for calling for an incorrect report. The ironic thing was, the day after I got reported, I went into Channel 7, and Doug Thomas, my good old mate Doug, he came and he said, what'd you say? What was the report about? And I said, I got reported for calling him an effing cheat. And he spontaneously said, well, that's not a problem. He said, Jack Broadstock got reported for telling the umpire to stick the whistle up his. And he said, when he got to the tribunal, he said, I didn't say that. I told him to lay the whistle on the grass. And Doug said, when you go to the tribunal, don't say you didn't call him an effing cheat. He'd be better off trucking sheep. Anyway, that was an aside. That was a sort of a happy moment in a very, it was a wrong report. Anyway, as I've already said a couple of times, awards didn't mean much, but it would have been nice to have won. So I was basically in contention for 2 McGarry medals and missed out on both of them. But that's fine. I guess the encouraging thing is that I gave Barry Rodman his first McGarry medal and the encouragement to go on and win another 2. So. David came from Darwin, a shy, black as the ace of spades Aboriginal. He developed into a character that was eloquent. He had beautiful manners. My mother loved him. He was in our home. He'd stand up when my mother came into the room. He'd eat a meal and put his knife and fork, as we were educated to do. He was just a lovely bloke, and also a very good footballer. as sad at the end of the day as his demise. He had a nickname, Soapy, which I'm sure you're aware of, and he derived that nickname because, as I mentioned also earlier, we used to have the communal shower and baths, and David would get into the shower, and soap himself up so he'd be white like us. So hence the name Soapy. But he was a lovely bloke, and unfortunately the Catholic Church decided, because he was married to a Genevieve who was deaf and dumb, she was mute, they decided that she should come to Adelaide and assimilate into the city with David, and it didn't work out. So David and Genevieve went back to Darwin, and then the tragedy happened a few years later. But some of the other players, the characters, Alan White, it's just Alfie Skews, Mickey Rivers that came from Broken Hill. They're all characters. They're all different people. They weren't footballers. They were people that the Foster boys. They were people that you could relate to. You could have fun with. You could joke. You could trust them. Felt comfortable in their company. But it wasn't only the South Adelaide footballers in my club. It was all the people that I met from other clubs. You know, I used to hang out with the boys from Sturt. I used to hang out with the boys from Port Adelaide. Wayne Jackson from West Torrens, all the West Torrens boys. I had a group of, at Glenelg, it was just a group of blokes that we'd get together somehow, somewhere along the line, and that was all part of footy. And you know, that still happens today. I'm still friendly. Up until Bob Philp and passed away last year, 3 times a year there'd be a group of Port Adelaide and which I'd organise, and we'd go down to Port and have a lunch together. I used to go out with the Sturt boys out to the pub out at with Neville Cunningham. Jack was always there. Jack Halbert, Bruce Jarrett. You know, just guys like that we had a really good affinity with, and that's part of my era. I can remember playing against, because they were sort of, not in my eyes, but they were heroes in the football world. Barassi, Kevin Murray, all those blokes that were, a lot of them I ignited with just recently in this Hall of Fame dinner I went to. And it was, Des Tubnam. I can remember those players. I can remember playing against them, but I can't remember anything about it. I couldn't tell you how many we won or lost. I don't think we won too many, but I played in Tasmania, Victoria, West Australia, and so to answer your question, I really can't remember too much about state footy. We were down in Tasmania, and Foss was Jekyll and Hyde. He was just a beautiful man off the field, but he was just a raving lunatic as a coach. And might I say, he was successful in his way that he came across as a coach, but he had us all down there. I can tell you a couple of stories about him. And he's giving us a pre-match speech. You know, you got to hunt like a pack, and who's going to be the low dog that's going to let the side down? And I just thought that was too much. So I was sitting in the background of a serious pre-match speech going, oh. I don't think too many people were listening to Foss after that, but that was something a bit silly. But how can you relate to a group of blokes playing football as a pack of dogs? We were playing Victoria Adelaide Oval. I can remember this, and Foss at half time we're well and truly in front. We were in front of the Victorians. and Fox has come in, he's got all the Sturt boys, he's got Bagshaw, he got Keith Chessel, he got Adcock. And there was one other Sturt bloke there. For some unknown reason, Foss picked on him. Barry Roblin was there. And Foss was trying to gee us all up. And he went to Adcock and said, I want you to say we're going to go out there and kill them. And Adcock shook his head, he wouldn't do it. He went to... I think one of them was a Lutheran minister. I'm not sure there was... Anyway, he ended up by going to Keith Chessel and said, I want you... And nobody responded to his request. And he went to Keith Chessel, and Keith just said, I'm not saying that. Well, the whole room just deflated over that. And as a result of that, Victoria ran over us in the last half. But that was Foss. I mean, that was his method. It worked down at Port Adelaide. He could get away with it, but when you had an eclectic group of blokes that are all different, it didn't quite work so well. Oh, my work was fantastic. I've had a great life. Been lucky. I've had a lot of ventures that at least I've had a go at and didn't work. I've been able to recover. I left school and worked for Phil Ridings at Custom Credit. I had 2 years with Phil Ridings, and I loved it. It taught me to be a man because I was dealing with all the tough car dealers, and they were smart cookies. They were a lot smarter than me, but I got on very well with them all. I went from there and I worked for TAA. I had 10 of the best years of my life with TAA because in those days they were real hostesses, and travel was fantastic. And I was very lucky that I was a sales rep for TAA, that I could combine my job with TAA with playing footy. And I was always overseas or travelling somewhere, and I had 10 of the just best years of my life. Football, TAA, football, TAA, football maybe, TAA, football. And then Ken Cunningham and David Darcy had a pub. And I thought, shit, if they can have a pub, so can I. And as a result of that, I bought a hotel. And it's not that I had a lot of money, it's just that I was able to do it. I had 2 years at that pub, and it was just a 7 stars, and it worked pretty well for me. I sold that and went overseas and lived overseas. I've been to America nearly 40 odd times. I had a house in Florida. I used to spend a lot of time over in Florida. And then I came back from America and then worked for Ken Eustace at Eustace Motors, having made a bit of money in the Seven Stars Hotel. And then opportunity came up for me to buy another hotel, which I embraced. I still got it today. It was not a bad investment, and it was. I worked there for 2 years, went back to America, worked for Gliderol, and then came back from America and then had quite a few hotels since then. I retired at the age of 55, which is ridiculous. In retrospect, it was a terrible thing to do. I thought I just didn't want to take the gamble anymore of running a business because it was all changing because of poker machines, and I still don't believe in poker machines. And then in between that, I did 2 tours of cricket of India. I played a bit of cricket in India. Which I loved, met the right people, and it was all just part of a lifestyle. And I've done I did a rodeo with Graham Ferret, a mate of mine from Glenelg. It was the best rodeo I've ever had, but I lost 350 grand. Which is not funny, it was a lot of money. It's a story about that, but yeah, no, I imported cricket gear. I was in partnership with Rowan Jarman Travel. I'm not going to die wondering, But at the end of the day, things have turned out pretty well for me. I'm not rich, I'm not poor. I've got a lot of friends that are still going. Because of a bit of a hearing disability, I'm become a little bit of a recluse. I quite enjoy my own company, but it's purely frustration and embarrassment that with this hearing impairment that I've got. But yeah, no, life's been fantastic for me. I don't think I've trod on too many toes, or if I have, I've always been able to shake hands afterwards. And yeah, no, life's been fantastic for me. You know, when I'm in town, I usually have a coffee with KG on Sundays, and he's just a great bloke. And you know, things like I can remember Ken coming to the football with his dad, carrying his kit bag for him, and Ken, who was the most insecure, most unlikely umpire that you'd ever, but you put him in wide on the footy field and he was a different person. And that was reflected in his future life, of course. He's gone from a bloke that had a stammer and a stutter. Who would think that he'd be a very successful radio announcer? And he has been very, very successful. Yeah, but KG's a good mate. In my opinion, they've got no skills. There's nothing in it that I can relate to. They're different skills. And I don't enjoy watching it. I certainly don't enjoy watching the women's football. I think the AFL is kidding themselves. They're obviously an incredibly successful business organisation, probably one of the biggest in Australia, business organisations. But they're doing it at the expense of my club, who I'm still very much attached to. I see how they struggle, number one, to field a women's side, which is great. I'm not against women's footy, I'm against the exposure they get. I'm against the money they get when none of them are ever going to play AFL football, whereas the players from South Adelaide might have a chance, but all the other league clubs are really struggling to keep their players, and the good ones get stolen. Now, I can't see in my lifetime that South will win another premiership, and it breaks my heart. I get one good player or two good players and the AFL whiffs them off. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I still like amateur footy, I still like country footy, and I go to as many South Adelaide games as I can. The reason I go to South Adelaide is not so much about the footy, it's still halfway between old style and AFL, but I can still relate to it. But I go because I believe by me being there, it gives something back to the club and to the supporters that are still there, that have been there 30, 40 years. And I love seeing some of them. And I think, why? Why are these people, why are they spending their time and their money to support South Adelaide? And I think I owe it to them. And it's a long drive down to Port Noarlunga, I tell you, to see a game. But they've been doing all right. And hopefully AFL will wake up. I've been trying to get the league clubs together to challenge the AFL, to stop this denudation of club players, or a proper recompense if they, not $50,000, $500,000. And that then would give the local clubs the opportunity to go out and try and develop in their areas to encourage people to come and play. I look at the 5 or 6 or 8 of them that are getting all over $1 million a year salary, I just say it's not right. Because in our day, the trainers and the officials, they're all volunteers. I said to my club the other day, I said, how many volunteers you got these days? And the manager looked at me, and the CEO looked at me, and he sort of said, well, not too many. I think there was 1 or 2 or something, and back in our day, everybody was a volunteer. And they are gone, unfortunately. So AFL, great organisation, superbly run, but at the expense of the grassroots. I look at country footy. Where's country footy going to go? They can't amalgamate anymore. The Mid-North, they travel 200 kilometres a week to go and have a game of footy. I mean, it's crazy. People can't afford it. So, is that going to change? No, sadly. Can't amalgamate anymore. And amateur footy, struggle. They're not amateur anymore. A good player that doesn't go to the AFL gets picked up on the amateur league and $500. Well, they've got to survive, but it's at the expense of my club. Yeah, 150 years. That comes up next year. They're releasing a book, 400 page. It's gone. It's a 400-page book, which I think history's got South Adelaide got a fantastic history. They've been around, as you say, 150 years, and not too many clubs and organisations have been around that long, and they've had a lot of characters, a lot of good footballers, a lot of interesting people. Charles Kingston Cameron, or whatever his name was, who started the club up. I mean, really interesting history. Trouble is, 400 pages, I don't know if I'll get through 400 pages. I've demanded number one. I've paid up. I want number one book.